coming up on the Outside of Sunday podcast.
What's up with the uniform? What's up with the uniform? Again, it's the sense of identifying with our cause. On my uniform that I wear, there's an S on this side and an S on this side. It's save to serve. Mm-hmm. It's so much.
I'm a little disappointed, to be honest, that you're not.
But I'm not
uniform right now.
And we have this phrase like soap salvation, that sense of actually helping people in the things that are right in front of them before you can talk to them about their spiritual well-being. Actually, how can I help you with make sure you've got food in your tummy so you can think straight to actually hear about Jesus, and he cares about all of that, and so I love the love in action that the Salvation Army is, and again that comes from our heart of people who love Jesus and want that people would experience what we have.
You don't just say, I'm passionate about Gisborne, and I'm going to start a Salvation Army in Gisborne. No. It is top-down orders. It's like an army.
It's an army.
Yeah.
It's an army.
I had someone say to me once when I said, my husband grew up in the Salvation Army, and they were like, oh, isn't that a cult? So let's just put it on the record. Is the Salvation Army a cult? Hey, you're listening to the Outside of Sunday podcast. Is your faith stuck on Sunday? Christianity was never meant to be constrained to a weekly church service. I'm Krista, and here you'll find discussions on the Bible, mum life, and of course, how to live your faith outside of Sunday. Hey Outsiders, it's Krista again. Just a little note before we start this episode to say, please extend me a little bit of grace. We had some technical issues with the audio recording today, so please just have a little bit of grace. I really appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast and watches this podcast. I think you're amazing. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hey, welcome everyone to this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast. We're here today with Sarah Green. Thank you so much for coming, Sarah. Sarah has her own podcast called In the Dust.
Yep.
So maybe we could start actually with that. Can you tell us a little bit about In the Dust podcast?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me. It's really special to be here and to be chatting together. So In the Dust was inspired by the idea of Jesus as our rabbi, and that we want to walk close enough that the dust that he flicks up from his sandals covers us. And we're like, oh, yuck, dust. But no, yes, dust. I want to live like Jesus. I want to walk close enough that I catch what he carries and that I live and love like him. And so that's how I want to live my life. And that's, I guess, how I want to inspire others to live their lives too. And so it's been a real... that's been a real driver behind. I felt God really calling me to share in a podcast, and when I thought about that was the kind of the theme, and then everything has kind of come from there.
Yeah. How long have you been doing it now?
Since February.
Oh, that's so cool.
Episode 35 went out today as we're recording. Yeah, and so it's just like, wow, like being faithful and consistent in that space. It just, so it's a bit special. Yeah,
it is. Well, you're a special person, and it does take consistency to do this kind of thing. Yeah,
getting in a rhythm, and just making it work.
So tell us a little bit about yourself though, like in terms of family life, walk with the Lord, all of that.
Yeah, cool. So married to Andrew. We got married the year after you guys got married, and so
2010 then.
Yeah, so maybe the year after that, 2011.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we were 2009.
Yeah. So been married for 13 and a half-ish years, and we grew up in our church together, and so grew up in our faith together, grew up in our understanding of Jesus and who we are in him together, and that's just, it was a really special thing that to have. And so we've got two kids. Hannah's almost 9 and Archie's 6. And Andrew and I have served as Salvation Army officers since we were for the last 10 years.
Wow.
So that's, and nature's home for us. It wasn't where I was born, but it's a place where I found my spiritual home, and where I guess our home church is. And so we celebrated 140 years of that church a couple of weeks ago, and so it was really special to go and acknowledge the journey and those that had sown into us in that space.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Salvation Army? Because I feel like there's two sides of it. I feel like some people will hear Salvation Army and they'll instantly just think of, like the Red Shield appeal, the work that they do, Salvation Army family stores, their op shops, their food banks, and that is all people know. There is a church side of it, but could you just tell us a little bit, about what makes the Salvation Army unique, I suppose.
That's good. So the Salvation Army was founded originally not wanting to be a church. It was serving the people, the least, the lost, the people that everyone else kind of didn't really want to know about. And then their plan was to kind of funnel those people once they'd found Jesus into the churches, and the churches were like, no way, we don't want those people. And they're like, I know it is. And so William and Catherine Booth, our founders, they were like, well, we've got to make our own church then, which we never kind of really anticipated. And so the Salvation Army was birthed in England in a time where the military was a really big thing, and so uniforms were a really big thing, and so this sense of we are a little bit quirky, right? We wear a uniform, and that's a real witness thing. Actually, we belong to the Salvation Army. We the army thing, like in the military thing, but we're kind of the war for souls. That we want to see people saved, and yes, people's souls saved, but their whole selves transformed. And so the community drunk would, the person who was the worst of the worst in terms of their drunkenness, like they wanted to go for the souls, go for the worst, see the people's lives radically transformed, and people would kind of find God, find Jesus, find the Holy Spirit, and be totally sober from then. And so we've got this amazing history of that war against darkness, and so 150 years ago-ish in London, that's our whakapapa, that's what we go back to. And there's so many other stories about how people's lives have been radically transformed. And so our heart to see people transformed like that comes out of our love for Jesus, and out of our sense that he's the only one who can transform us. And so we want to bring that life and that hope to others.
Is it William Booth who had they would walk through the town and do singing their gospel songs?
Yeah, and often they were songs that were pub songs, and then they had they read the words, and so to make them about Jesus. And so people would know the tune, so they're like, I know that tune, but then they would notice that actually, hey, those are not the same words that I would sing. And so a lot of our traditional Salvation Army songs are pub songs, and I love that using William Booth said, if I could see one more soul saved by standing on my head and playing a timbrel with my toes, then I would do it. And so actually whatever it costs, whatever it takes to see people, to gather people, to see them come to know Jesus, to experience the life transformation through the Holy Spirit, I'd do it. And I love that. Well, that's just such a I think it was Paul the Apostle who said, I want to reach the lost by becoming all things to all people, in order that I might save some. That is a massive verse for my life. That's what I feel like whenever I feel uncomfortable, even in this podcast situation. I'm just like, look, Lord, all things for all men, that order that I might save some. I mean, I know I save no one. It's the Holy Spirit, but Lord, use me how you will, Lord Jesus. So So you said they started churches because nobody wanted the dregs of society. I don't know how else to put it. But that's how people saw them. But that's not what they are. Obviously, they are valuable image bearers of Jesus and of their Creator. That's right. And I think that the idea of it caught people's attention when the people that were recognised to be the lowest of society actually then rejoined society, and oh, hang on, something's going on here. And that sense of, and only God, someone couldn't pull themselves out of that. Actually, only God could do something there. And we have this phrase soap salvation, that actually the sense
was that soap salvation?
That's the one. Okay. This idea that people's tummies are hungry and people can be a little bit smelly, but actually and so actually want to address, not that being smelly means that you're not good enough to have salvation, but that sense of actually helping people in the things that are right in front of them before you can talk to them about their spiritual well-being. Actually, how can I help you with make sure you've got food in your tummy so you can think straight to actually hear about Jesus? And he cares about all of that. And so I love the love in action that the Salvation Army is. And again, that comes from our heart of people who love Jesus and want that people would experience what we have. with him.
Yeah. So if you walk into a Salvation Army church,
Yes.
what are you going to see when you are sitting in the pews?
Probably a few uniforms.
What's up with the uniform?
What's up with the uniform? Again, it's the sense of identifying with our cause, right? Often we have S's, depending on what kind of uniform people are wearing. Sometimes we have our red shield on us a lot, and so the Salvation Army, or Te Ope Whakaora, the army that brings life. But there's on my uniform that I wear, there's an S on this side and an S on this side. That's save to serve. It's so much.
I'm a little disappointed, to be honest, that you're not.
That I'm not
right now.
It was. We wore civvies this week. We wore our civilian clothes this week. We didn't wear any uniform.
It's very army.
It's very army, and again, it was. Sometimes we wrestle with how does that contextual today, but I was wearing my Salvation Army jacket at the V8 earlier this year because that's the kind of the best jacket that I have, and someone stopped me at the McDonald's and said, "Oh, you're from the Salvation Army. We've got a whole heap of chairs that we just used at the V8s. Could you guys use these at your shop or something? Can you take this?" And so the sense of being identifiable, like it wasn't a salvation story, but it was a sense of we're so identifiable, and so actually we've got to wear that with care too. And so, am I ready for people to come up and talk to me about this? And in Taupo, that's not my space, but actually I know the people local here, and we can organise something to help make that work. And so the sense of being identifiable as the Salvation Army when we're out and about, but also when we meet together. And we have a special uniform we wear kind of for Sundays. It's our number one uniform, or our more formal uniform, and it's the idea that it's kind of a set apart day. It's not the same as every other day. And as we gather on that day, our focus is around gathering together, but it's about kind of giving God our best. We might have had to iron our shirt. That's that sense of, no, actually I put some effort into this. And some people might think, oh gosh, that's a little bit over the top, and who knows, maybe it is, but actually there's a sense for us, there's meaning in that. There's or there's not, and we just wear a uniform and that's fine, but there's that we're identifiable, and we connects us back to who we are and what we do. That's cool.
So the process, you're an officer now. Can you tell us about the process? I know a bit because obviously I'm married to my husband, and he grew up in a Salvation Army church, so I know a bit of it, but I feel like a lot of people probably have no clue that there is method, there is ranks in the Salvation Army, there is a major, there's a general, all of that. So can you just tell us a little bit about that, and then of course your own journey too?
Yeah, sure. So the whole thing around the Salvation Army is also its membership, which is there's adherents and soldiers, and so the idea that an officer is like a leader of soldiers, or like a team leader of soldiers, and so that the soldier becoming a soldier, signing up to have a soldier's covenant, is not between us and the Salvation Army, it's between us and God.
What even is a soldier?
Well, I guess that's a military thing. Someone who's enlisting themselves to go and fight, and this idea of the war for souls. And so someone who really has said, yes, I love Jesus, but I also recognise that there's souls to be won here. There's people that we want to know Jesus, and so a soldier, when you enroll as a soldier, that's something that you said that it's about what you believe. So there's some I believes, which is our doctrines, and then there's some therefore I will, and so there's ways that you will live out this lifestyle as a soldier. And this is not like I've made it, I've come to that sense of perfection or anything like that, because there's no one like that, but that sense of there's maybe a sense of calling, or a sense of surrender and submission, really. When we're a soldier, we say we don't drink, or we don't or drugs, or that's just something that actually we abstain from, and a lot of that is because the people we were serving and helping, actually that's a real trigger for them, and that's something that, so if I can have one drink but you can't have any, that's a tricky thing to navigate together. So we just don't.
Yeah, I understand that, especially because of the work that Salvation Army does. I know there's a lot of recovery things, helping people with addiction and stuff. So I feel like it does make sense if you are going to sign up to be on board as part of the Salvation Army. I suppose, is it leadership, or is it just
So this is like the soldiership is like membership, I guess, in some ways, but that sense of real. You can still come along to the Salvation Army and absolutely be part of the Salvation Army without being a soldier. It's not. I guess it's an exclusivity without being exclusive. I don't know if that makes any sense.
And it's not a class system.
It's not a class system. No.
But it's just if you choose to.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
You want to make that.
Yeah. So you have to be a soldier, a senior soldier, before you can be an officer.
I see. So it's like step
it's
one
of
if you want to become a Salvation Army officer.
Yeah, because you can't be an officer if you haven't been a soldier, because the officer's covenant builds on the soldier's covenant.
I see.
But you can't. So you kind of can't. If you haven't submitted and surrendered in that space, then you can't necessarily lead in that space. Yeah. Yeah.
And so for people who, again, I just completely understand, some people have no idea what that is, and fair enough, I'm not saying you need to, but let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
The officership.
Yeah.
That is when you are assigned a church. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so you there's a sense of calling, like testing in ourselves, like has God, it's not something that you want to do because you think it's going to be a fun ride, right? There's a sense of and each person's different in the sense of feeling called to the ministry or called to be an officer, and then you've got to kind of fill out some forms and to go through a process of through your local people, regional people. Are you up to that? Like kind of testing your faith, testing your sense of how strong you are in your faith. And then you might go to the training. Then you have like a weekend at the training college, which is more testing the process, testing the calling, and then you might be accepted into training. And there's 2 years residential training.
Okay, so...
And you're not guaranteed to get out the other end.
Okay, so if you're passionate about leading a Salvation Army church, for example, you are a soldier, then you sign up for the officer side of thing, you test it out to see actually, that is biblical, you don't build a building, that's a Bible verse I'm misquoting, but no one builds a building without considering the cost. And I suppose that's what you guys go through, is you consider the cost, you see if this is something for you, and then if you do, then you do the 2 years, and then from there, if you graduate, then you will become like a pastor. So I mean, I just want people to be able to understand. So a pastor is basically like the same as an officer, if in our context.
I guess so. A pastor, a minister. It's tricky because when you're appointed, so the Salvation Army chooses where you go. Which is another thing. It's very different.
People don't know. You don't just say, I'm passionate about Gisborne. And I'm going to start a Salvation Army in Gisborne. No. It is top-down orders. It's like an army.
It's an army.
Yeah.
It's an army. And you get to share about, the Salvation Army, get to know your family. If some people need to be close to hospitals for healthcare reasons, some people need to be close to the other part of their family because they're a blended family. Like there's things that are taken into consideration. The army's no longer kind of just cold and dry towards that. But actually, in our surrender means actually, God, I trust you. I trust where you're going to lead, and I trust the Salvation Army, which is full of humans, to make decisions that might not be perfect. But actually, that God redeems that, and so it's a trust in God, and yes, a trust in the Salvation Army, but God is bigger than that. So that you've got to come to terms with a lot of things, and I think for all of us, and no matter where God is calling us, and what that looks like for us, that actually we've got to come to terms with being able to surrender the things that we might want to hold on to, or that we might want for our lives. People think, how could you do that? How could you just your kids moved around? But I've come to peace with that, and I trust, absolutely 100% trust that God's looking after us.
And people move for various reasons, I guess. So what generally happens, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, you would be assigned a church community that you would go and serve at, and then you might be there for a couple of years, and then you might get, this church needs help here, so you're assigned there.
That's right.
now?
So and so they usually come and say, "Is there any reason why you cannot move to such and such
is that how it's presented?
And take up this such and such appointment?" And so, like the wrestle with, is it like a pastor, is it like a minister type of thing, is it's overseeing all of the Salvation Army's work in that area. Okay. And so and so yes, there's the church and the people and the stuff that goes on Sunday. There's the social mission that happens during the week. So whatever each centre, each place will have different services to the community, whether that's the food bank and then there's you're right, there's the family store. There might be like the Bridge Centre or Addictions and Centre locally, and not that I'm expected to oversee all of that, but I kind of represent all of that in the community. So as an officer, and yes, there'll be staff members and leaders in different places and those things, but and I'm not line managing all of those things, but there's a sense of actually being connected to all of that. And so like I might have a really big team and a big community ministries team that I oversee, and so there's a lot of management and leadership, and we do chaplaincy to the family store. There's a lot of oversight that goes on. It's not solely looking after and pastoring a church, and so that's my wrestle, and like kind of what does that look like. So it's quite a broad role in that sense.
So you and your husband are officers together. So how does that work?
Well, for us, we started off as being officers in the Salvation Army in Kapiti in Paraparaumu, and so we did that together, and we were there for 6 years, and then we got these new roles in Miramar. Again, is there any reason why you cannot move to Miramar? And so I was appointed as the main leader for the Miramar Corps, the Miramar Salvation Army, and then Andrew's role was in social housing, and then he did a little bit like an assistant officer to the church. And so we had these kind of somewhat split roles, but knowing that, so even in his role with the social housing, actually we come being spiritual leaders in whichever space we are. And then in May this year I got a new role at the headquarters, and so I no longer, I guess, pastor a church. I'm in the business section and do a bit of the business support in that space, but I love that it's not like I've turned off my tap of spiritual leader in that space, or someone that's follows Jesus. Actually, I love that I get to be a 7-day-a-week disciple and how I live that out. And so as I encourage my team, as I lead my team, as I interact and support the Salvation Army churches across the country and their business proposals and what they're doing and the mission stuff they want to do, that actually I get to be involved in that and to be real support in that. And so I think although my hands aren't on the front line doing that kind of work anymore, there's a sense of being able to really support the mission and use my skills. I'm an accountant by trade, so using my skills to be able to do that. I tell people that I love Jesus, I love people, and I love numbers and systems, so it feels like a really great fit.
I wish you lived here.
And and being able to use those things for the glory of God and for the salvation of souls. And there's people in our headquarters. There's a lot. There's like 300 people that work in this building, and some of them love Jesus and follow Jesus, and others don't, but they so believe in what the Salvation Army does. And so we're the mission field right on us.
So how do you get to work for the Salvation Army headquarters if you're not an officer or a soldier?
No. In our officer force and group of soldiers, we don't have all the skills that we need to do all the different bits.
Oh, right? I see. So it's like it's almost like it's a workplace.
Yep.
And it's filled with whoever meets the requirements for the role.
That's right.
But then obviously you want people who believe in the mission of the Salvation Army in terms of saving souls and reaching the lost.
Yes.
But you still have these roles that need to be filled because of, the massive work that Salvation Army does, especially when there's like disasters and things like that. That's probably boots on the ground is really what they do so well.
Yeah. And in that back office stuff, like you need really good accountants, you need really great people that do legal stuff and tax stuff, and HR stuff and IT stuff and all those things, and there's a lot of people that part of other churches that work for us, but people that just want to know that the Salvation Army makes a difference, and I want to belong to that. And so it's
it's pretty special. Like when we were at the 140 year celebration, you know, they're reflecting on everything that's been kind of done in that time, and it's just so cool. Like the drug and addiction programs, I'm not sure quite what they're called, but and then also the boots on the ground, feeding, like wasn't it like 4,000 meals in like 3 hours that they made, or crazy numbers of meals that they're effective and they're very hands-on. And I like that it's tricky in a way, because we want to help the community, we want to help our neighbor, but are we going to put a string on that? Like, are we going to say, but let me now share the gospel with you?
And that's the tricky thing, right? And so that sense of love and action, but does that come with strings attached? Is just the simple fact that we're meeting human need enough to show Jesus?
Well, I feel like to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, obviously that's what William Booth saw.
Yeah.
He saw that, you know, you could heal the body. This is something that I actually was thinking about, because I was, I won't get into it, but I used to think that, I was like, what is the purpose? I mean, what is the point? If someone's body is healed and helped and whole and they're fed or whatever, and then they go to hell, you know, like they're not reached for Jesus.
Yeah.
It's the eternal man that counts, you know, that person matters now, yes, but their eternity is so much more important. It's a real
wrestle, and I think that's something that that we've continued to wrestle with, and I think it's is it a blanket thing? Is it a moment person by person thing? Because some people, we journey, like, 'cause we do a lot of housing stuff, we do like the social housing, we do transitional housing, there's a lot of stuff that, and journeying with people, giving them the opportunity, and I guess that's the continued wrestle.
But I think it's great. Like, I do think it's, you know, I think we as Christians should be the leaders in charitable work. We should be the leaders in helping our communities. Absolutely. And so hats off to the Salvation Army, especially for that. Like, I think that's amazing. I can't remember, did I ask you already? Please tell me if I have. I had someone say to me,
yes, that is a cult.
Yeah, I had someone say to me once, when I said, my husband grew up in the Salvation Army, and they were like, isn't that a cult? So let's just put it on the record. Is the Salvation Army a cult?
I sure hope not. No.
You're stuffed.
No. Oh man, I'm taking it. No. But we might be a bit misunderstood, because like those quirky things, those military things, and we're a bunch of people, we're a bunch of humans, and so in our desire to help people, to see people know Jesus, maybe some stuff does come across in a weird way.
Weird. You're weird, but you're not a cult.
Not a cult.
But I feel like every Christian church is weird, and we're called to be weird. We're not supposed to be normal.
That's right.
And I think it's hard to know as well what a cult is. I mean, you can look at something and say, that's definitely a cult, but I think every club, every community has a little bit of a cultish aspect.
That's a good point.
You know, if you think about a rugby club, I was talking to somebody else about this. I can't even remember who it was, but we were having a chat and we were like, you know, a rugby club can be considered cultish. You know, if you were to leave, would you be shunned? If you were to go to the opposing team, you know, like, and not that I'm saying that's how churches should behave at all. But, you know, there's a lot of cultish aspects in the wider community as well. But, not a cult.
We're safe.
You can leave at any time.
Yes.
Well, that's the most important thing. It's just the freedom.
And the choice.
The choice. Yes, you have the choice. That's right. You have the choice if you want to sign up to be a soldier. You have the choice, you know. Is there anything preventing you? Do you want to go to this location or not? Cool. Any final thoughts on the Salvation Army before we move on?
I think just our best days are still ahead of us. We can easily look back and think, the best was in the past. But I just really believe God isn't done with the Salvation Army, and I'm excited about what the future holds.
Thank God for the Sallies. That's the saying, isn't it? Who started that? I don't know. I feel like that must have come from outside of the Salvation Army, you know, like just reflecting on, the good.
Yeah, because that's an awkward thing to say about yourself.
I know it is.
Thank God for us.
Yeah. Okay, well, I thought we could talk a little bit now about something that both of you and I have gone through, which is the loss of a parent.
Yeah.
So tell me about your dad. I mean, I already feel like he was a wonderful person, but let's hear from you. What was your dad like?
Oh, yeah, my dad. So my dad grew up in a Christian home, and so he knew, had some faith and stuff, but I feel like he really found that personal relationship with Jesus and really went deep and really kind of put that into action during our time in Napier. And so us as young kids and for mum too, like I felt we grew up in the faith together, and so it was pretty amazing. He was really impacted by Promise Keepers, the men's gathering, and that really men's ministry, and that really grew him. And so he was really passionate. He was a man of few words, a man in the background. He didn't kind of like the spotlight much at all. He had lots of different jobs and was just able to connect with lots of different people, but didn't like being at the front. But he was just really passionate about God, about revival, about heaven coming to earth. And so and just really wanted, like for us kids, he wanted us to experience everything that we could, and would take myself and my siblings around all these different places when we were playing different sports and that kind of stuff. Just a really generous dad. Always himself was last, but he just so wanted, like really cultivated our faith as well, and really wanted us to, he'd take us to drive youth group around and whatever it was going to be to help us get closer to God and to help us, our friends, we like, I want to invite all my friends, well I'll go pick them all, he had to go pick them all up. Let me use his car to go pick them all up, or when I could drive, and all those things, and just that sense of really, really just wanting to lay his life down so that we could live life, and especially in that sense of our faith.
Yeah, and so when did you first find out that he was unwell?
Mum and Dad moved to Christchurch at the same time that Andrew and I moved from the training college across to Kapiti, and then so 4 years in, they moved. We'd had 2 children, and they moved up to stay locally with us, and so they would stay a few nights at our place and a few nights at my sister's place and live in until they found a spot for themselves. But and it would have been in that time. So Archie was just the first kind of year of Archie's life, and he's 6 now. So and then we found out that he had lung cancer. Never smoked in his life, had lung cancer. And so, but it was all good because they were like, we'll just kind of operate and we'll open him up, cut that bit off, and close them back up again, and it'll kind of be fine. Might do some treatment. And then they found that when they opened him up that it had spread, and so they didn't go any further. They just kind of popped him back up again, and then was like, okay, now what's next? And I remember my mum, our social worker from the church, because mum worked at the church too, coming in the door. It was our day off, and she brought mum with her. I was like, oh, what's going on? And just that sense of, the cancer spread.
Yeah.
It's not quite as easy and as tidy as we thought it might have been. And then from there was a journey of chemo and radiation and things, and there was such great faith around us that God could heal Dad. And I believe that too. But as time went on, I could see that things were getting worse. And it was a real tricky situation where I wanted to be real about the fact that my dad was nearing the end, but also still hold faith that actually God could do something. And that was a real, like, such a tension, because I want to have enough faith, God, to believe that you can heal him. But I also don't want to be in denial and miss out on these precious times. So I think it might have been about 18 months all up between when we found out he had cancer and then when he passed away. we actually were going to be moved by the Salvation Army, and then so we had got farewell orders, or we were before all this happened, before we were aware of this, we were going to move to Oamaru, and I felt a bit unsettled about it, but I thought maybe that's just what you feel when you're getting moved, because it was going to be our first move. And then a month after it was all out in the open, and we got a ring in to say, can we come and have another chat? And we're like, I don't want to know what you're going to tell me. But they're like, no, it's all good. You guys are staying. There's had to be a rearrangement because other people are sick, and we've got to rearrange, and so you guys are staying. And so we got to stay and be close to, and without even knowing that my dad was sick.
Wow.
And so again, I have this, even in the humanness, even in the humanity of the Salvation Army and their choices, actually I have this real deep sense that God is still in control. God
goes before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we got to stay, and then we got to stay another year because Dad had just passed away, and so and so it was just so and we got to see lots of fruit in that time, and that was just really, so it's just amazing how God knows. He's the great orchestrator.
Yeah. It's interesting that your dad had lung cancer, because that's what my dad technically had, but then he had it in all through his body, and that's not even, they didn't know that he had lung cancer. Oh. He had a mini stroke.
Wow.
When he and my mum were in Hawaii for a family holiday, not with me, but like a family, like my mum's sister, they're really close. The whole family is really close, and I love my family. But everyone was over there, and so Mum and Dad were going over there, and as soon as Dad got off the plane, he had a mini stroke in Hawaii. Yeah. And then it was it was like the Lord. We found out that he had cancer because Hawaii is part of America, so the American system is you're sick, let's find out everything that's wrong with you. Wow. There's a problem, let's find out everything. They ordered all of the scans, all of the things, and praise the Lord, they had travel insurance. It didn't cover everything, but it certainly helped. And then that was when they could see, because otherwise, I imagine if he had been in New Zealand, he would have just been treated for his stroke, his mini stroke, and then the cancer would have gone, and he would have left us much earlier than he did. And same as you, so believing for healing, so believing for healing, and pray. And I'm not trying to discourage anyone for praying for healing, please, don't feel that from me. But so we got a miracle. We got the drug that Dad was suddenly eligible for after we'd been praying and suddenly eligible for this drug that just radically transformed his health, and that sustained, that lasted 18 months, which we knew it wasn't going to last forever. That's what the doctor said. And then he was going down again. And so it was twice when Dad was in hospice care. The first time was right before the drug. And so that's when we thought we were going to get loose in that first time. And I was like, no, he's going to be fine, faith in God. And then he was for 18 months. And then when he deteriorated again, and he was on hospice care, intravenous morphine and things like that, I was like, oh yeah, he's going to be fine, because the faith. And I had I was in denial when Dad died, so it was kind of opposite of you a little bit. But were you there when your dad passed? What was that like? So it was in the January, which again, it's amazing how only God can orchestrate stuff like that, right? So it's not a busy season, and and so we were able to, they were living in Otaki, we were in Kapiti, it's not a very long drive, and so we were released to be able to go and spend days, and he was at home, and the nurse would come and visit, and so we were able to go spend days. If the family gathered, and the kids would they would in care, and so they would keep going there, and then we'd go back and pick them up. And he died on mine and Andrew's wedding anniversary. Wow. And I can remember, I was like, oh, it's our wedding anniversary. And I can remember, when I was sitting with Dad by myself, I can remember kind of sensing that he was not, he wasn't alert or anything, but almost like that he was holding on. And it's like, Dad, I know, you know, it's okay. Let me relieve you of feeling like you kind of need to hold on here. Was it, you think he was holding on to get past your anniversary? I reckon, because the last thing that my dad would want would be to
hurt me. And so that was, it was an interesting thing. But you know, like I just wanted him to be with God. I wanted him to be released from pain. So it was kind of felt like, not that he needed my, but that, like a gift to give him, I guess. Like, Dad, you have given so much. Be released into the arms of Jesus. And so we were all around him. And another time when I was sitting with Dad, The Goodness of God was a song that was kind of new in that space, and that with every breath that I'm able, I will sing of the goodness of God. And that was just, has always been a really, so I sung that over him and with him, and so it continues to be a special song. All my life you've been faithful. All my life you've been so good, even in the face of death and you know, just that sense of being robbed of having my dad around. Actually, no, I'm just really going to declare God's goodness.
Yeah, that was the song my mum chose for our dad's funeral, well, my dad's funeral, her husband's funeral, and it was very similar timing. I suppose he's losing our dads, because it was like the new song, and Mum was like, no, we're going to have that song, and it's a beautiful song. And how has it been though for you, having a couple of wedding anniversaries since then?
One more thing first before that was that it was just before COVID, right? I'm not sure about the timing for you, but so we didn't have to have any, like, having to choose to shut down everyone that couldn't come or anything like that. And so I'm so grateful that we just didn't have to navigate any of that, but really appreciate that was a gift and not everyone's story.
Yeah, we got to have a proper funeral.
So that was our 9th anniversary.
There's tissues there if you want tissues.
Was when Dad passed away, and so our 10-year anniversary, we're like, right, we know that that's going to be a year on, we'll organise an early anniversary time to go away, and my mum will look after the kids, and that'll be all good. And then a really good friend of ours that time had a bike accident and passed away.
Dave.
And I'm like, God, can we not just be able to celebrate our marriage?
Was it on the same day? Don't tell me it was on the same day.
No, it wasn't on the same day, but because we had chosen to celebrate early, it was, and so Mum had the kids, so she ended up taking them up to Napier so she could go to the funeral. We watched online from our, but I was just like, but actually no, God, you're still good.
Absolutely.
Even in the face of death. Since then, our wedding anniversaries have been a lot less full of death. But it's mixed feelings, right? It's mixed. There's a sense of celebration because of, we celebrate our marriage and God's faithfulness in that. But also there's a sense of remembering Dad. But we often remember Dad more on his birthday than maybe the day he passed away as well. And so...
I was like, what do you even call that? Like, me and my family, we went away for a holiday on the day that our dad had passed away. My mum had booked like a batch for us all in Ohope, and we all had like a nice weekend. And it's like, because I don't know what you call it, it's like a death anniversary. Like, that's so depressing. But like, it was not sad. Like, I feel like we have, there is, I mean, it doesn't mean you love them any less. Absolutely not. You don't need to be, well, I didn't feel bitter. Did you feel that at all, or what were you feeling?
I probably myself felt like the gift of my father. I was so grateful for it, and that sense of I am so grateful what I've had. And so I guess in sense of you, just like celebrating what I did have as opposed to what I didn't have. But you know, my dad got to meet my 2 kids and got to spend time with them. My dad hasn't got to meet all of his grandkids, and they haven't got to meet him. And so
I mean, that's
sad. Different,
that's okay to be like, that's
and so there's different levels of grief, I guess, across our family, and that's got to be okay too, right? And not think like, oh, I've got to be more like that person or like that person. And we did gather, so because Andrew and I had our anniversary at a different time, we did gather as a family in that January and went and spent some time, not that my dad's in the ground where the headstone is, but and so that was just, it's good to come together and to acknowledge. We had ginger beer because that reminds us of Dad, and
Cute.
had some other food that he enjoys, and things like that, and so we like to do that, and that's it's a cool way of celebrating and remembering him.
I think it is cool to celebrate and remember. And it's a common saying now, I can't remember who first said it, but comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
But it is also the comfort for now, in a way, because I could have lost my dad when I was 5. I could have lost my dad when I was, gratefulness is so key, because we don't know what a gift we have in what we have right now, and yes, we lost our dads around the same time, but man, I'm so glad that I got to have my dad right up until he passed away. And of course I want to have him forever. I'll have him forever with me in heaven. And that's something to look forward to.
It is, isn't it? And so in the Salvation Army, we call it promoted to glory when someone passes away, and that sense of actually it lifts our eyes upwards. Actually, they've been promoted. They're in glory with Jesus.
It's a holiday.
It's amazing for them. There's a sense of, it's a great thing, and we've also got to. We don't want to use that as a sense of denial from the pain and the loss that we're experiencing.
No.
And so my mum has remarried a couple of years ago, and
I didn't know that. Wow. And
so she met a lovely man in her camper van group. And so I got to officiate that wedding, and
what? Wow.
And so he's a little bit older than her, and she's not quite retirement age yet, but she's been able to retire early. And so the thing that was most robbed from my mum, was from my perspective, was her and Dad they had worked so hard, and they were really looking forward to their retirement days together, and it was just like, they're not even going to be able to do that, but she's been able to retire early with Joe in their camper van. They get to go, we're looking after our kids this week while we've been here at fellowship, and and so she's living her best life, thriving. And so the thing that was stolen from her actually has been redeemed, and earlier than she, it just blows me away. And I know again that's not everyone's story, but I'm grateful for how God is writing our stories.
That must have been really interesting for you though, as a daughter.
It was, but Joe loves my mum. He's not trying to be my dad. And
I suppose the benefit of that is that you're all adult children.
We are,
Yeah.
And it was, again, different for each of us, but there's a sense of, he loves my mum loves him. I don't want to rob her of that. Who am I to say that she can't have that? And he's not trying to be my dad. But he loves my mum. Not that he's not trying to be my dad, but, he doesn't feel like he has to be a dad to me. And so, but he's a Papa Joe to the grandkids, and it's really special for them.
That's nice.
And man, I love seeing my mum happy, and so again, why would I want to stop that?
Absolutely. That's so cool. I'm so happy for her. That's really, really special.
It is.
So now that I'm just thinking about the listeners here. If you could give some advice to listeners about, everything that you've kind of gone through with losing your father, that's a key person in your life. What advice would you have to somebody who's going through that?
I think, like we say, that kind of that tension between holding faith and living in reality, I guess just checking in on ourselves about that. It's and actually those things can sit together, and we don't need to be in one camp or the other, and so being we might lean more one way than the other each day, but actually being okay to hold that together, and being kind to yourself in that space. There's people that I've come across since losing my dad that kind of remind me of similar things of him, and so I guess letting them in.
I've found that.
You
know what, it's so funny,
like a dad hug.
There are men at my church who I've known since I was a teenager, and I don't look at them and think, I wish my dad was alive. I just think, it's so nice to see you because you remind me of my dad. they're that certain age, they have, obviously the Spirit of God lives in them, and so you just see them and you're just like, oh, well, that's so nice to see you, and like get a hug or something like that. Not that I'm saying, guys, you have permission to give inappropriate hugs, but when it's appropriate.
Follow the
But yeah, that's interesting that you say that.
It is, and I said to one of the guys at church recently, I said, oh, you remind me a bit of my dad. He said, oh, I wondered about that. I guess he wondered about but I said, I also really care about you as a person. He's recently lost his wife, and I said, I really care about that, and I guess I acknowledge the journey, and I kind of have an understanding of that journey, not of losing a wife, but losing a close person.
Losing someone significant.
Yes. And so you're able to journey with people in a way that you can't if you haven't gone through it. But that sense of being kind, being able to navigate that, like hold intention, the sense of hopefulness and not wanting to be in denial. And like we've talked about, that sense of gratitude, being grateful for what we have had. Practicing
that is good. I think I didn't handle, like, I was like obviously sad that my dad had passed away, but then I was not stoked with how my husband was like treating me. I've talked about this on the podcast before. I was like, dude, come on. Like, I had this weird, I don't know what it was, I just had this expectation of how he would meet me in my grief, and he didn't meet that. But that was wrong of me to think that my husband is the one who's going to relieve me of my grief. He can't, like, he could have done everything right, and he's not going to be the one. It really is the Lord. It really is the Lord. And so that is something that I would say, just from my personal experience, is like, go to the Lord, like cry, have your grief to the Lord, and practice gratefulness, and just be thankful for what the time you did have. And but I feel almost scared saying that, because I know that people can be so hurt, and so like they might not have had our kind of story.
You're right.
So it is hard, but just know that our hearts just go out to you, and the Lord, truly, he's the one who knows every detail of what you're going through.
He does. And sometimes we can have a really hard relationship with God because we've had a hard relationship with our earthly dad, right? And so how can we trust this God if we haven't been able to trust our dad? But God knows us, and he made us, and he knows our hurt, and he knows how to kind of meet us there. So I guess there's a sense of being open and vulnerable before God. That in the song too here it says, your love has freed us, we're free indeed, spoken to our pain, revealing hope again. And that sense of, I love that, spoken to our pain, revealing hope again. So actually receiving God's love and allowing that to speak to our pain, to be seen in who we are, as who we are in our pain, and then to bring that sense of hope. For sure. And so just bringing it back now to your podcast that you do, can you just tell listeners a little bit more about like what the vibe is and how each episode kind of looks, just to give them a little bit of an idea, because it's different from this, which I think is great. I think, I talked to you about this, when it comes to Christian content, we need a buffet, like we need, and we complement each other, and I think that is the great thing. So tell us a little bit more about like what people can expect if they tune into In the Dust. So I'm all about being able to listen to like the whole thing, and so it's kind of like between 7 and 15 minutes, depending on how long I just kind of get on my little thing for, how long I talk for, and it's really, I guess that it's aimed at people who know a little bit about Jesus or are walking with Jesus, and are just wanting to be able to put that into practice in a really helpful way in their everyday lives. And so I come up with a topic or a thought, and I talk about that for a little bit, but then I kind of talk about, so what is God saying to you in this? How are you being led in this? Who do you need to talk to about this? And so I guess it's if you want to like a word around it, there's a sense of discipleship, but really it's about putting into practice what God is revealing to us. And so I've done like things that are really like, I've read from scripture, I've talked about our visit to the racetrack, like really everyday life stuff. It's quite spread in terms of kind of the topics or the things that I talk about, but really everyday life, right? How do we live everyday life in the dust of Jesus, following after him, living and loving like him, and how can what we do be more of that?
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like we're almost being invited into your life, and hearing about what the Lord is doing in your heart, and then also being challenged, not in a bad way, in a good way, to reflect on what the Lord might be doing in our own lives, which is a great prompting for that, absolutely. And to be more keenly aware, I think, as well, of like where the Lord is leading us each and every day.
God is speaking to us all the time, and how can we tune in to hear that?
Yes. And what does it say in the word? My sheep hear my voice.
Yes.
He is the good shepherd. We want to learn how to hear his voice.
That's right.
Awesome.
So hopefully it helps people to be able to tune in.
So great. Well, one last question that I ask everyone, and you know it's coming.
I know it's coming.
How do you live your faith outside of Sunday, Sarah?
Now, Krista, I've been thinking about this one since we even started talking about this. And I wanted to come up with some grand
is on.
thought.
No.
But I think, like, it really, for me, it comes down to a sense of tuning into God and his obedience. And so what does that look like? Well, wherever I go and whatever group of people I'm around, I guess I'm just aware of what God's up to. I'm aware of encouraging people. I feel like I'm like made to encourage people, and so just to really encourage people in that. And I love to sing, and I love to like worship and pray for people. So as appropriate, I guess having the confidence when God says, go pray for that person, or go say something to that person, actually that quick obedience. And just knowing that, I carry Jesus with me everywhere, and not that I have to be the answer for everything, or be the Jesus in the room, but actually just believing that he will prompt me and show me, and I just have to do it.
Yeah, you just have to do it.
Just have to do it.
Yeah. I love what you said. Yeah, we don't have to be Jesus. Like I feel like that was a weight that was kind of put on people. You have to be Jesus to that person. Nobody's Jesus but Jesus. Okay, settle down. No. But yeah, if we can point people to Jesus and help with discipleship and things like that, like so great.
Yeah, and like I say in my podcast about we catch what he carries, but actually other people catch what we carry. And so actually just by being a person who loves Jesus, we might never know what people see in us. And actually just so not trying super hard, but actually just relaxing in the fact that we shine anyway. Yeah, it's
great. All right, well thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks everyone for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Congrats, you made it to the end of this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast. Thanks for the support. Become an official outsider by liking and subscribing and leaving a 5-star review. If you'd like to connect with the podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search Outside of Sunday podcast. And don't forget to let someone you know about this podcast.